got all this stuff.
I mean, yeah. Listen, you guys kind of have all the 16ths on that beat that it starts. So I mean, I can. Yeah.
I have the first one. On my second page. Yeah. Yeah. The first one is got this one. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Congregational Church of Austin. It's starting to maybe look like it could be fall this week, maybe. We'll believe it when we see it. But I'm delighted to welcome you to worship today. Today is what's designated as Access and Disability Ministries Sunday in the United Church of Christ. And if you don't know, we have a whole kind of office and division in the United Church of Christ that's devoted to mental health and disability and making those concerns that affect many, many, many people more visible in the life of our churches, with an emphasis on how do we create a church that's more accessible to all people. Not how do people with disabilities fit in, but how do we create a church that is truly open and inclusive to people with all kinds of disabilities, both visible and invisible. So I'm really delighted that Carolyn Thompson is going to be preaching today. She has many years of experience working in the United Church of Christ and with the World Council of Churches on disability and access ministry. And I'm just delighted that she will preach for us today. And then eventually we'll have another after-church session. Gentleness, we're through the wilderness, falling and free. Spirit, Spirit of restlessness, stir me from us in this wind, wind on the sea. You sing in the stable, you cried on a hill, then you whispered in silence when the whole world was still. And down in the city, you called once again when you blew through your people on the rush of the wind. Spirit, Spirit of gentleness, move the wilderness, calming and free. Spirit, Spirit of justice, stir me from us in this wind, wind on the sea. You call from tomorrow, bring ancient schemes from the bondage of sorrow. Captives dream dreams, our women see visions, and men fill their eyes with bold new decisions. Your people
In our scripture today, we'll have a responsive reading from Genesis 1. It's printed in your bulletin. I'll read the regular print, and please join me for the bold print. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth.
This word, disability. How does it make you feel? Where do you think you've acquired your ideas about disability? Maybe from folklore, fairy tales, Disney movies, novels, TV. A disabled person that you know, your professional training, your own lived experience. Disability does challenge many fundamental expectations that we have. It confounds our human notions of health, order, status, and success. But rather than confront these anxieties, I think that we often shroud the subject in silence and try to distance ourselves from it. By not acknowledging our own discomfort, it's easy to project our fears onto people with disabilities, who then become the scapegoats that bear our own insecurities. We either demean them or venerate what we interpret as their virtuous suffering. Sometimes we hear people say something like, "There but for the grace of God go I." Or, "I can't imagine living life in a wheelchair like you do." There are a number of models or frameworks used to help us understand the concept of disability. You'll recognize some, and others may be new to you. They have a lot to do with how disabled people are treated and what we expect from them. One that's been around for ages is the moral or religious model that often sees disability as a curse or punishment. It could be an evil spell cast by an enemy, by a witch, or punishment for something a person or his family did. The disabled individual may then be presumed to be wicked or possessed. The charity model sees disability as a tragedy that warrants pity. This is a typical approach used by organizations pleading for money, and you see the pictures in the brochures they send in the mail that you get every week. This model tends to picture the disabled person as a helpless victim with no agency of her own. The economic model considers a person's worth in terms of the economy and whether they can provide for themselves and their household. Individuals who cannot hold a job due to their disability are often seen as a burden to society. And I'm not saying all these models are wrong or right. They exist. And just name some of the ways we think about disability. For years, Western society's attitude toward disability has been dominated by the medical model. This approach relies on a medical diagnosis to define the problem and the solution. While physicians and researchers have worked wonders to cure disease, alleviate pain, treat injuries, restore function, the medical model perpetuates the idea that disability is always an individual problem to be fixed or cured. It ignores the reality that disability involves much more than a person's body. The social model emerged in response to the incomplete perspective of the medical model. And this came about as the disability movement was beginning to find its own voice after a lot of the other civil rights movements that have spoken out about their place and the importance, the role of society. So according to the social model, people are disabled, not just by the medical conditions or impairments in their bodies, but by their environment, both the natural environment and the built environment, and by attitudes and systems that create barriers to their full participation in society on an equal basis with others. These models may help us comprehend some of the ways that disability is viewed, but where do we look for ideas and beliefs that are really life-giving for people with disabilities? Where is the hope, the redemption, the sense of belonging? To move our thinking in this direction, let's turn back to the scripture that we heard earlier. Remember our responsive reading? What a diversity of panoramas and life are described in this first chapter of Genesis. And we don't even need to travel the world to see these amazing landscapes and creatures. Nature programs and the new Webb telescope in space bring these vistas right into our homes on TV or computer screens. It's very clear from this account in Genesis that abundance, complexity, variety, and difference are essential to God's master plan. Perhaps even disability is part of this diversity that God intends for creation. Just as we welcome gay, lesbian, and transgender folk, people with different skin color, different types of hair, different shapes and sizes, let us also make this a place of welcome for people with all types of disabilities. We're also told in the creation story that at every step of the way, God looked over the new world and declared it good. The text does not say perfect. Most of our ideas about perfection come from classical Greek culture and are amplified by the advertising industry that tells us daily what we need to do or buy to attain this perfection. I do not believe this notion of perfection is what God intended. The passage from Genesis also tells us that we are made in God's image, that humankind reflects God's likeness. Maybe it takes all of us to do this, each person a piece of the puzzle or mosaic that make up the image of God. Perhaps this indescribable God can only be mirrored in the diversity of humanity. Disability is a natural occurrence in our lives, a contingency of being human. We do not have control over all the circumstances that can result in disability, and it has been the Creator's design to place this breath of life in fragile earthen vessels. I'm reminded of a remark by Helen Keller, who said, "Life is a great adventure or nothing at all." And we know that adventures can be risky. There's a fragility to this life, a vulnerability. I think we don't often think of God as also being vulnerable. But when out of love he created the world with all its different systems, creatures, and humankind, he then set us free to respond however we might choose. I ask you, does any more vulnerable position exist than the one of a lover who has declared their love for another and then awaits their hoped-for response? God's is not a controlling power. God's creative and providential presence is vulnerable, desiring our relationship, but not demanding it. Some people think vulnerability has think of it as an undesirable quality. But I think that sometimes it can give us a position of strength. If a disabled person has already confronted his own fears, perhaps even stared death in the face, he may be less likely to concede when faced with new threats. Perhaps he has learned how to live with uncertainty and trust that God will show him the way. Paul has wise words for the community in Corinth about the importance of each member. He compared the church to the human body and points out how each member is essential. The body could not function if it were all hands or all feet. If each part were identical to the next. He also says that there are varieties of gifts and service and activities, but it is the same God who activates them all. He reminds the members they should not say, "Since I cannot perform like you, I do not belong." Or, "Since you're not like us, we do not need you." He says, to each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. If one member suffers, all suffer together with it. If one member is honored, all rejoice with it. The focus on individualism in our country has put so much emphasis on being self-sufficient that I think we have forgotten we are created to be in relationship with one another. We are interdependent. We also need to remember that a person's disability is just one attribute. It does not constitute the entirety of who that person is. Each person has something vital to contribute, a gift for the building up of the whole congregation. It can be a gift of leadership, or a hug, or a smile. We need each other for our gifts to be revealed. Individuals with disabilities, as well as our families and friends, may have gifts to share precisely from our experience of living with disability. We have learned to be adaptive and use our imaginations to solve new problems. We're resilient. We've become accidental experts in areas we never expected to encounter, and we can perhaps guide others in this new territory. We do not all have disabilities, but we all face challenges, struggles, and crises in our lives that can feel overwhelming. It is with the love, encouragement, and support of those around us that we can find hope and a path forward and become a community where all know they belong. Let it be so.
Hey, CJ or Barbara, can y'all say something real quick? I'm testing out the audio on my end.
Hello. Is this one on or do I need?
Maybe I'll,
Okay, I'm helping with the mic. Oh, got it.
here's another one up here. Barbara and CJ and Nodi, it's good to see y'all, or hear,
Jamie waving.
hear you. Why don't we start with our online folks with joys and concerns? Barbara.
Well, good morning. Along with Carolyn's sermon, some of which I heard today, people were having pretty serious technical difficulties. And I'm going to go back and watch the recording, but I need to let you all know about my friendship with a coworker who is deaf and learning some sign language, and that's actually going very well. I think we're communicating reasonably well. There's not a whole lot of time to talk, but it's an adventure, and I feel really gratified by that person's trust in me, and I'm continuing every day to practice my lesson. And by the way, last week, the week before, I referred to him as hearing impaired, and I've since learned that that's considered rude. So my friend is deaf, and I apologize for inviting him in.
Generous God. CJ or Nodi, do y'all have anything?
I'll go. So I'm thankful for another year of life. Celebrating my 45th birthday this week. Thankful and also prayer request my sister Reed deployed, but her base is out of San Diego. So she made it there with a couple hiccups, but so she's back out there. And just continue to pray for my health and therapy. I haven't posted anything online yet because my nieces don't know. But I had a event during my therapy, my medical therapy on Friday. Ended up in the ER after 3 nitro and some baby aspirin. Things kind of resolved, but I think it was overexertion and stress. And I start back to work Monday, part-time. And I'm also looking for my apartment because I have to move out of here by November 13th. So lots of moving pieces. So I appreciate your continued prayers and support in that. And please continue to pray for Iran. If you don't know, the main political prison
This whole. What about here in the sanctuary? Pat.
I got to tell the trio before they left, what a joy to have them here today. We've needed that music. Brought me to tears. Surprise! My great concern is over the upcoming midterm election. I don't ever remember in my now somewhat long life being concerned about the midterm elections, but I am. prayers for the Phillips family, for Betty, and for Stephanie especially, and for Katie. They've gone through such a difficult time with the loss of Stephanie's spouse, Kathy Weiner. It's just been impossibly hard for them. Continued prayers for Joe Jensen, and prayers for Don Miles, who I found out has been in the hospital 5 nights at Lakeway because of mold in his apartment, and he's now back home and is hopefully doing okay. I haven't heard a confirmation of that, but he was well enough to write.
Yeah. Loving God. Oh, yes. I'll say first, loving God, make us whole, and then for Carolyn's wonderful sermon, generous God, we are grateful. Andrea.
Yeah, I just wanted to express how personally, profoundly disturbed I am in this campaign season about everybody trying to hijack the word Christian. You know, everyone who aspires to be Christian is trying to discern the word and is trying to follow the way of Christ, and I just don't understand. You know, we see these debates, I guess I'm talking about Georgia Senate debate in particular, in which they're saying